Welcome to Bible in the Backyard. Here we are in Sefer Dvarim, book of Deuteronomy, chapter 7, in what is a bit of a disturbing chapter. We have the command in this chapter that upon conquest, the Israelites are to destroy entirely the Canaanite nations and the objects of their idolatrous worship. The formulation in the chapter and sort of the overall law itself seems quite problematic. It's pretty xenophobic and harsh in its entirety, and it's bothersome. What do you have to say about that?
I hear that. It's problematic from our perspective, and I don't want to let it off the hook entirely. There's obviously a lot of violence and collective punishment in a way, but I do think it's important to think about the context in which this is being legislated. And I'll share actually something that a colleague, Daniel Smith Christopher, reports in an article. He says that he studied Ezra, who is also not tolerant of his neighbors, and certainly not of interactions with neighbors, with indigenous people in New Zealand, where Daniel does a lot of work, actually I think on an annual basis. And the indigenous people in New Zealand were like, of course you have to harshly kick out the foreign influences, because they understand profoundly what it means to be a minority culture under threat from a much bigger, more powerful, and potentially homogenizing culture. And I think that's certainly the mindset that we have to understand. We don't have to adopt it because we don't live in that world, but I think we have to understand that when we're hearing these laws about the Israelites are going to go into Canaan, Canaan's a big place. I mean, it's not a big place geographically, but it's been flourishing. We know of civilizations there for not just centuries, but millennia. Literate scribes, great cities, city walls. It's not a back country. And if they're going to set up shop there, they really are concerned that they're just going to be overrun, not militarily, but culturally, by this great Canaanite society that's been there for a couple of thousand years. And so I think xenophobia is not a bad term. They're really scared of the stranger, but it's also because I think there's a realistic appraisal that that's really the only way to survive in that sort of environment.
Can you imagine, are there any contemporary takeaways from this model when we think about a culture and individual culture that are, preserving and protecting, but in a way that's not xenophobic, right? Like, what can we take from this chapter for our contemporary lives?
Right, it's very hard. I mean, today in America we have this multicultural impulse, which in theory does protect minorities, and of course there are lots of cases where it really does, and it allows minority cultures to flourish in a way that's really unprecedented in world history. That doesn't mean that America is not actually, in the end, a great homogenizing force, even on those minority cultures. That it's not always simple to keep those walls up. The Jewish community is on the front lines of that sort of struggle. You want to be multicultural, and certainly there's plenty of areas where Judaism is championed. It doesn't mean that the Jewish society in America doesn't actually have to worry about just sort of fading away into this big American culture.
Great, thank you.
Tough questions though, thank you.